Hi, I'm Jim Spreadborough and welcome to From the Archives. Today it's my pleasure to have beside me here most worshipful brother Neville Smith, a past Grand Master of the United Grand Lodge of Victoria. Now Neville is a member of the Lodge Liberation and he's here today to tell us a little bit about Lodge Liberation and some of the artefacts that he has brought with him from Changi prison camp. Neville, could you tell us a little bit about Lodge Liberation?
Well, thanks, Jim. Thanks. It's certainly my pleasure to be here, and I'm very proud of our Lodge Liberation, which was formed originally from prisoners of war. They all came from Changi, and they had gone through the trauma of being a prisoner for those 3.5 years. The Lodge was formed in 1949, but those prisoners met in Changi during their time when they were being held as prisoner. And so it had its beginning back in the earlier times, but then became a lodge in 1949 when it was consecrated. It had as its logo this broken tree, Jim, and you can see that tree actually grew in Singapore on a hill at Changi, and it was so big that it actually featured on the maritime maps, and because of its possibility of being used by the Japanese as they were coming down the peninsula, the sappers in those days actually blew the tree to pieces. They blew the whole top off it, and it, for all intents and purposes, it was dead. Hence the dissectus non mortis, broken but not dead, and that's the motto of Lodge Liberation. It was also the motto of the Prisoner of War Masonic Association when they were in the camp.
That's fantastic stuff. Now, when in Changi prison camp, they had lodge meetings, and one of the marvellous things they had a lodge meeting when they decided to, how are we going to have it? So they decided that they had one member at Changi who was a Freemason who knew the Masonic ritual. And he hand wrote it all. Marvellous stuff.
Well, I suspect, Jim, that may have been written by a chaplain, and so it could have some mistakes in it, but you can see it's in very tiny writing. And when they had these meetings, the thing was that there was always the danger of Japanese guards because the meetings were not formally permitted. And so if the guards got too close, then it immediately became a church service.
Another beautiful instrument here is our square. Now, very beautifully, it says here, made from a Japanese AA shell for the Lodge of Instruction Prisoner of War Camp Masonic Association. They made their own square. Now, that is just magnificent.
Well, you know, Jim, that the square and compasses are virtually the universal emblems of Freemasonry, and the square being the particular one which belongs to all Freemasons, and so you can imagine why they wanted to have a square. In fact, there were other emblems made. They had one Masonic funeral in Changi. It was a very sad affair, but in order for that to be carried out, they made all of the Masonic emblems out of fan blades and attached them to the coffin for that particular brother.
Magnificent story. Now, beautiful story, just part of our beautiful history and heritage, you know. And the guys to find the time to still have this sort of, with all the horror that was going on around them, to have a Freemasons lodge was beautiful. We have a sword here. Tell us about the sword.
Well, the sword is estimated to be some hundreds of years old, but in particular it was one of the swords handed to General Sir Thomas Blamey, who was also a Freemason, so he was brother Sir Thomas Blamey, and he heard of the consecration of the lodge, that it was to take place, and so he very kindly presented the sword. He was not able to attend, and so it was actually presented on his behalf by the Grand Master of the day in 1949. General Blamey, of course, was the Commander-in-Chief for part of the Pacific Islands that certainly included Morotai, and it was at Morotai where the capitulation on the 9th of September, now that was after the major capitulation, which was to the Americans on the Missouri, but the sword was presented to him by the Japanese at that particular meeting on that day. And so we treasure that sword, as we treasure all of these things, as being something which is unique in the sense that we are able to have it.
Well, thanks for that, Neville, and it's been a great pleasure to have you here today to talk about the special items that you have at Lodge Liberation. It's been a great delight to me personally from the archives, and I'm quite sure that if you find some more of these sort of objects, please bring them in. And this is Jim Spreadborough and Neville Smith from the archives.
Thank you, Jim. It's been my pleasure to show some of our treasures.
Thank you.